Hi everyone, my name is Holly, and in today's video I am here to do a snowy fantasy, not really recommendations video because a lot of these books I haven't read, but they are on my own winter TBR, so I guess I would call this mentions. Books that take place within a cold, blustery, wintry environment that is typically my favorite setting. Throw in a band of mercenaries and you have like a delicious recipe or a 5-star read. I love snow. I was born on the first day of winter, so it's inevitable. Unlike my boyfriend Darren, who was born literally at the peak of summer and who hates snow, and that's where our differences lie. So I have a nice stack here of snowy fantasies that I think we both should really be excited about, and 3 of them I know you should be excited about because I have read and loved them. Whether you're traveling or you're just at home to avoid the weather in real life, you can pick up one of these books and enjoy the frozen tundra. So let's begin. I'm going to start with the books that I have read, and one of them that I can't help but shove in your face every other week, and that is Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. If you couldn't tell by the giant icicle on the cover, this is a perfect winter read. This is actually my favorite book of all time, and it's the UK hardcover edition that is also signed, so it is very special to me. I get a lot of questions from people asking me where to start when it comes to Joe Abercrombie, and I actually have a beginner's guide to Joe Abercrombie video that you should check out. I'll link that down below for you. And honestly, I don't think there is any wrong place to start. There's really only 2 options. You can start here with the Half a King or Shattered Sea trilogy, which again is just a trilogy, or you can start big and start with the blade itself and you'll begin the first law universe. So pick your poison. This is an epic fantasy with echoes of Viking culture, and we're following Yarvi, who is a young boy, and he lives a pretty miserable life, being mocked and shamed because he was born with a crippled hand, and he is the youngest son of the king. His entire life changes within a course of a day, and he has no choice but to take the throne. This book is incredibly fast-paced, it's philosophical, it's very emotional, and I feel like I was holding my breath the entire duration of this book. It really feels like you're going 70 miles per hour. There's really no ebbs and flows. The entire story is like peak, 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 peak the entire time. There's a great amount of female characters in this book, which I feel like is kind of hard to find in adult fantasy. There's actually a raunchy female pirate in this story, which is really fun to read from. But Joe Abercrombie, any character that he writes about, he really can't go wrong with, and I personally feel like that's his strongest trait. Any character he writes about, you somehow find it relatable. If there's any book you take from this list, let it be this one. The next book I have read that I highly recommend for a really good snowy read is The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. This is a fantastic adult read that takes place in the harsh Arctic in 1000 BC, and it blends Norse and Inuit mythology. Also a fantastic read involving the complexities of gender because our main character was born in a female body but with a soul of a man, and we literally follow her from birth within this tribe, and she's meant to follow in her father's footsteps. She eventually meets a Viking warrior who she creates a very complex relationship with, and he truly teaches her the balance of life and trust. This is such a fantastic story element and storytelling experience in general. You get to experience these Inuit people building igloos and hunting seal, and characters traveling through so many feet of snow and their detailed wardrobe, just Inuit culture and society in general. The author does so well. And it's nearly 550 pages, but it honestly never felt that long, and I was never bored. The next book is The Enchanted Sonata. Now, I read this book last December, so December 2018, and I loved it. It totally surprised me. This is one of those books that I saw myself reading every single Christmas to create a tradition. It's a fantasy retelling of the Nutcracker. It's a really emotional read, and honestly, I typically find these books really cheesy, but this one I didn't. It felt like a very mature read at the time, and that's not to say that someone young wouldn't enjoy it, because you definitely can. This book is the literal definition of magic. There's an evil magician, there's fairies, a talking nutcracker and giant rats. I was absolutely enchanted by this world, and the entire plotline is centered around music. It is built upon this aspect that music is magic and it is needed to save the world. In fact, our main character is a pianist, and that plays a big role in the story. I personally have never been interested in the Nutcracker, which leads to my knowledge of it being very minimal, but I fell into the story so easily and I became very comfortable with it, and it actually ended up being one of my favorites. Now moving on to the books that I haven't read but are on my own winter TBR, and this one is an obvious one because it has the word winter in the title, and that is Winter of Ice and Iron by Rachel Newmere. I held this one recently actually because I am very much lacking in the adult fantasy female author department, and I was on a mission to fix that problem. And when I saw this book on Book Outlet, actually, I'm a vlogger friend. I'll link my page down below, so if you're interested in this, you can get to that book very quickly. I knew I needed it, and I mean, a winter setting. I mean, look at this cover. It screams snow. This book takes place during the treacherous midwinter, and in a land where spirits inhabit the earth. We're following a duke and a princess who must protect the people of their nations when a terrible threat leaves everyone in danger. This is supposed to be very character driven and very political, focusing on human interactions. Also, this book is very dark, supposedly having a lot of rape scenes, so please keep that in mind. I would never want one of you to go into this book without knowing that. It is a standalone, which is music to my ears, so you're not making a huge commitment going into this one. The next book that might freeze your heart is The Song of All by Tina Count Myers. Was that cheesy? This book is very, very high on my TBR, and even though I am focusing on new releases this year, once I have a spot open, this book I am immediately delving into. I just can't get over this snowy cover. I adore it. It's actually set in a harsh Arctic world that is inspired by Scandinavian cultures, which sounds so fascinating. We're following a former warrior who is now just a simple farmer, and he lives with his family, but one day a stranger shows up to the village that he lives in, and he knows of some not so good things that the main character has done in the past. The synopsis actually mentions traveling through the dark and desolate snow-covered forests, and boy, is that something I want to get lost in. The next book I am incredibly excited to read is The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wong. This book somehow still eludes me. I've known about it since its release. I have owned the ebook since its release, and the praise and 5-star ratings haunts me in my dreams. This is a Japanese-inspired military fantasy standalone, and it is also self-published. It blends magical powers with modern conveniences like television and electricity. It takes place in a remote village that is surrounded by white mountains, which already sounds like a freaking dream setting to me. I recently read Child of a Mad God by R.A. Salvatore, which sounds very similar. There is just something so cozy about reading stories that is set in snow and sleet, in the silence of icy terrain when it's actually snowing outside. Like, am I right? And then I have The Winter Road by Adrian Selby, the word winter in the title. A winter read. This is a gritty fantasy that is supposedly for fans of Mark Lawrence and Joe Abercrombie. This is actually a book I would consider being in my orbit book of shame that I haven't read yet, and I can't believe it. It's following Tyr, who is a former mercenary, and she's tasked to lead a merchant caravan across thousands and thousands of miles through dense forests and unruly clans, and the hopes to unite them all and to also create a road, the Winter Road. Yeah, this is another standalone fantasy, and also many of my friends have read this and have loved it, so I am expecting to love it as well. The next book I just really want to quickly mention, and that is The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. And yes, I am putting up the cheesy cover because it is the best. This book takes place up in the north, and it really radiates this wintry, snowy feeling. I didn't grow up reading this series, so I haven't read it, but I do own it digitally, and I have been really itching to pick it up, especially with the TV show out, which looks amazing. That freaking polar bear looks so rad. I am a little bit worried, like, am I too old to read this? then again, that's like saying, is someone too old to read Harry Potter? And those words should just never be spoken. And the final book I have here is actually on my digital TBR, and that is Cold Counsel by Chris Sharp. This is actually not a very well-known book, but I spotted it on a Tor blog a while back, and I saw the cover and was instantly intrigued. And it sounds like something I'm really going to enjoy. It's a snowy themed fantasy that is steeped in Norse mythology. It takes place after the events of Ragnarok, and you're following our main protagonist, who is a troll, which sounds really fun. And he is actually the last troll known to be alive, and he is raised very harshly by his mother, who is a witch, because she wants him to grow up knowing how to survive. A reviewer actually describes this book as old wine in new packaging, and I'm here for it, honestly. This totally sounds like a classic sword and sorcery read with humor and adventure, and it might be the perfect winter read for you. Alrighty, so those are 9 snowy reads. Tell me down below of any more snowy, wintry fantasies because I want to know them all. Go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed because it helps me out so much. And don't forget to subscribe. I upload videos every single week. Follow me on Instagram at Holly Hearts Books and on Twitter at Holly Niece. And until we meet again, happy reading.